club takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Anine, hello, bonjour, and thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Restuhl, and I'm a director with Canadian Club Toronto. Although we are meeting virtually today, we recognize that Canadian Club Toronto sits in the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We thank them and all those who have come before us for caring for the land and water in a way that allows us to continue to gather here today. Miigwech, Miawen. Merci à tous de vous être rejoints à nous pour la discussion aujourd'hui. Thank you to each of you for tuning in for today's discussion. The security of critical minerals and materials supply has become a significant concern for governments in light of disruptions to global supply chains. For Canada, this is a matter of national, economic, and technological importance. Today, we're joined by an expert panel for a discussion on how sound fiscal and regulatory policy, as well as active equity participation by Indigenous businesses and communities in Ontario will build the path to prosperity in Northern Ontario. Before we hear from our panelists, here's some information about how to participate with us. The click here to switch stream button helps if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio quality should remain strong. Once you click the questions tab, you can enter your questions in the window and they will be sent to the moderator. The request help button located in the bottom right corner of the page is for technical support. The Canadian Club is a nonprofit and we have been gathering people together for over 124 years. And it is because of our sponsors that we can continue to do that. Thank you for today's event sponsors, Castles and Avalon Advanced Materials. We are grateful for your support of today's discussion. All right, let's get to it. Today I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. The Honorable Greg Rickford is Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, and Minister of Indigenous Affairs. Chris Hodgson is President of the Ontario Mining Association. Don Madahbee Leach is Vice Chair of the National Indigenous Economic Development Board and the General Manager for Wabatech Business Development Corporation. And Donald Bubar is President and CEO of Avalon Advanced Materials. Following opening remarks from Minister Rickford, today's discussion will be moderated by the Honorable Lisa Raitt, Vice Chair of Global Investment Banking for CIBC Capital Markets. Welcome and thank you for lending your time and views today. Guests, panelists, at this time, I ask you to reach over for your cups. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is the toast that we make to our country. With your drink in hand, please join me in a toast to Canada. And with that, Minister Rickford, I turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This is a really exciting opportunity, and I was hopeful at some point to do this live, and I'll remain hopeful. I do want to declare per the opening presentation that I'm actually not here to speak about issues that matter to us. I'm here to speak about the opportunities that matter to us. I think that as we navigate our way through this pandemic, it's kind of nice just to have a really good news story and focus on the positive elements of, no pun intended, of some things that are going on here in our vast and beautiful province, and in particular across Northern Ontario. That brings it home for me as a guy who lives in Keewatin, Ontario, perhaps the province's farthest northwest outpost, before we hit the Manitoba border. And I'm delighted to be here again with my friend and colleague, Lisa Raitt, and as well the other panelists who I've had a chance over the course of 2 chapters in my political career to work with. So thank you to all who attended here, who are attending here today, and I'm delighted to see so many people participating online. I had the privilege to make an announcement for the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, of which I'm the chairman, and we had a record 898 people. It was really cool to experience, even though you couldn't see anybody. So let's join together in spirit here and proceed to talk about an extraordinary opportunity for the province of Ontario. Here we are in 2021, and Ontario stands at the threshold, if you will, or the precipice of an immense opportunity. As the world recovers from the effects of COVID-19, and with each passing day, more thought is focused on economic recovery, creating jobs and rebuilding a path forward for our economy. We know that just as we discuss our economic future here today, governments and industries around the world are doing the same thing, all with one essential goal in mind: creating post-COVID competitive advantages. And there is no doubt that technology and innovation within traditional industries will be central to overall economic recovery. Makes perfect sense. Technology, and to a certain extent, innovation in technology platforms, is what's gotten many businesses and fora like today through this pandemic, as we find new ways to join each other for important discussions about the global economic situation, Canada's plan, and for the purposes of today, Ontario's part of Ontario's plan, as I may represent it as the minister in my portfolios. But industries like healthcare, defense, aerospace, and aeronautics, automotive and electric vehicle industries, especially for the purposes of today's discussion, will all play pivotal roles in the new economy to come. Indeed, the lifeblood of those industries is what I'm here to talk about most today, and that is critical minerals. Last year, the World Bank forecasted an increase in demand by a staggering 500% by 2050 for certain critical minerals. That is a massive increase in a short amount of time. You don't need to be an economist to understand the implications of such a profound and dramatic change opportunity. I want to talk a little bit about critical minerals use. While critical minerals are the building blocks of the future, we sometimes forget their application in our everyday technologies, in fact, our lives right now. Critical minerals such as copper, tungsten, manganese, cobalt, and graphite are used to fabricate mobile phones. Graphite is a prized mineral with a wide range of uses. At its most humble, you'll find graphite in pencils. It's often used as a dry lubricant, but it is also used in electronics for its incredible capacity to withstand and transfer heat. Lithium, an essential component in batteries for electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles. I suspect in our panel discussion shortly, we'll talk about the incredible opportunity and the inertia that's developing right here in Ontario around battery power. And as the Minister of Energy, battery storage as it onboards here in our province in the not too distant future. The electric vehicle market, or EV market as it's being called, is growing exponentially, with with traditional auto manufacturers all bringing in new EV and BEV models online. Some manufacturers, I'm thinking of Volkswagen and Volvo, have even gone so far as to committing to build only fleets of electric passenger vehicles within the next 10 years. So we need to get with the times and get with critical minerals. Sorry, Lisa, I had to be a little bit of a geek there. But the rise of electric vehicles has attracted new players in the auto industry, such as NIO in China and Tesla in the United States. A year ago at PDAC, I had the opportunity to speak with the Undersecretary of Commerce. By his invitation, he wanted to talk to the Ontario government and its representatives about a partnership around and centered squarely on critical minerals. And it's our hope that as the COVID pandemic lifts and our vaccinations develop, we'll be able to explore some of those conversations face to face. In the meantime, we remain committed to tracking new partners in the United States and around the world as a place to do business. I'll talk about a little bit more about that in just a minute. But I want to just talk for a few more moments about the auto industry. Colleagues, friends, we can expect to see the increased demand for critical minerals across a wide variety of industries in the future. And it's exciting for our province. And as mentioned earlier, governments and industries are looking for that crucial competitive advantage in the critical mineral space. Indeed, we've heard Quebec talk quite recently about their play in lithium. But here in Ontario, our mining industry already has advantages baked in. We're blessed to have a broad range of high demand critical minerals and rare earth elements in an exquisite quantity and exquisite quality. They include copper, zinc, lithium, chromite, cobalt, nickel, and platinum group metals. We have an experienced, highly skilled workforce. Some would say a good problem to have and one that we're addressing, and that is a highly skilled workforce deficit in the mining sector, with a stellar reputation for safe and responsible mining. Our mining industry operates in accordance with the highest standards the world over and is subject to the strictest environmental and ethical rules and laws. And finally, our mining industry operates with a consistently stable political climate, making it a reliable supplier. When you put all of this together, you can see why Ontario presents such an attractive proposition. We have the supply, the materials, the know-how. We're reliable and responsible and ethical. So let's talk about what the government's role might be then. First, it is not to build mines. The role of the government is to seize the opportunity to capitalize and further Ontario's reputation as a world-leading mineral exploration and mining destination. It's about unlocking new opportunities for Northern and especially Indigenous communities. It's about a government that sees this incredible potential and stands ready to seize the opportunity for benefits for all Ontarians, and that's precisely what we're doing. It's about a government that takes note, not just of our capacity in mining, but for the first time possibly in a long time, to bring together the mining sector and the automotive sector, as I mentioned moments ago, and create a fully integrated supply chain. This is something that we see as critical and something that we see as perhaps our biggest opportunity in the critical mineral space for a more fulsome sensibility of the true opportunity for the province of Ontario. In order to meet these opportunities, we've worked with industry to address regulatory barriers and streamline business processes to attract mineral exploration and development and investment. We've played a far more significant role as a government in making sure that the automotive sector and the mineral sector are having a full, frank conversation with us and with our Indigenous communities and northern municipalities to see how and why we can do it. Progress is being made. Recently, the Premier Minister Rickford and I announced the first cobalt refinery in Ontario, Canada, and North America. We're very excited about this, and we see it just as the beginning to refine and further develop our critical minerals. We've taken significant steps to cut unnecessary red tape and bring clarity to our regulatory framework. And we have even more coming down the pipe this spring. Our government continues to work with those industry partners with a particular focus on Indigenous leadership and local communities to engage in conversations about the future opportunity for resource development. So let me pivot for a moment on a critical mineral strategy as we try to bring these parts together for something meaningful for the purposes of today's discussion. I just want to talk about the recent development in mining policy that came through last week, as I was pleased to announce that we are developing Ontario's first ever critical minerals strategy. No question, we have an ambitious vision for critical minerals, one where we can generate investment from like-minded nations and increase competitiveness in global markets while supporting the transition to a cleaner, greener global economy. We've brought critical minerals to the forefront of our economic recovery, and now we're asking stakeholders, Indigenous communities, and other interested parties to participate actively in developing this strategy. We've published an online discussion paper that includes a draft critical minerals list, and it's intended to collect feedback to support the final strategy development. I encourage all of you joining us here today to read that discussion paper and to join us in any forum moving forward with respect to the strategy that we intend to roll out next fall. We want to generate feedback that enables us to provoke real-world, positive, and tangible results. This is not a strategy destined for a bookshelf. It is one to meet the incredible opportunity that we see and that we hear around the world. And we intend to send the strongest possible signal to the world that this province is open for business and open for jobs, particularly as it relates to a critical mineral strategy. Our strategy will help Ontario position Ontario as the supplier of choice for responsibly sourced and reliable critical minerals, all while creating the kind of good-paying, high-quality jobs here in Ontario. And friends, that makes perfect sense. If you, for those of you who study the economy, particularly over the course of this pandemic, you'll know that almost without exception, certainly perhaps only during the first wave of this pandemic, that it's been the mining sector that has maintained a stable source of revenue for Bay Street, for the coffers of the Government of Ontario, and for the communities most proximal to mining operations. And we're very proud of that accomplishment. And I want to thank a number of the companies and as well municipalities and Indigenous communities who remain committed to the market, responding to the reality that there was still a significant demand for Ontario's minerals, and saw to it that when and where possible, they continued to operate. But as our province becomes a more significant player in things like the electric vehicle value chain and other key supply chains, we will take even greater steps to become a global hub for critical minerals. It's an exciting future, and it's one that I can't wait to see. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to today's discussion. As I like to finish in saying, my name is Greg Rickford. I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for the Great Kenora Rainy River. It's a privilege and honor to serve my constituents, and as a huge fan of the mining sector, for the purposes of today's discussion, to serve you folks too. Thank you for this opportunity.
Excellent. This is where we applaud, Minister. Thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. We have a lot of people online today, and a lot of people are already sending in their questions. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm actually going to start with Don Bubar, if I could, Don. And I'm going to ask you really specifically, because we want to get to as many questions that are coming in as possible. But I wanted you to give us a little bit of an understanding of how this industry is different than traditional mining. And we'll have somebody who represents lots of people in the traditional mining sector in a few seconds. But secondly, very interested in your Thunder Bay lithium project that you have in partnership with the Fort William First Nation. So if you could talk briefly about those two things, then I'll move on to our next panelist.
Sure, I talk about this a lot. And I'm delighted to hear the minister talk about a new strategy in this area, because it was definitely needed. But I also think it should form the basis for a whole new industrial strategy for Ontario and Canada to take full advantage of our natural resource wealth and all the other critical minerals that we have in the ground. And I was pleased to hear you say, Minister, that it's about technology and innovation. You're exactly right. It's about creating the demand by innovating on the downstream value-added opportunities that will create more demand for some of these more obscure critical minerals. So we're on the right track here. We now have to update and adapt the regulatory system to better enable these to get done quickly. Otherwise, we're at risk of others beating us to the punch. But I think you're headed down that path too, and I'm delighted to hear that. And I think you'll also be pleased to hear that on the refinery, our vision has been to create that downstream processing capacity for lithium minerals produced in Ontario. And you need a centrally located refinery in a place like Thunder Bay with good transportation infrastructure. So we have a vision for establishing one there, and we're getting quite a lot of interest now from the local community, including the leadership of the Fort William First Nation, who have reached out to me wanting to collaborate with us on this and establishing it on their industrial lands that the First Nation owns in Thunder Bay. This would be a very powerful, positive new precedent for how industry can work directly with First Nations, but also more importantly, they share my vision for how this could create new opportunities for other First Nations communities in Northern Ontario to begin to create supplies of those critical minerals needed in battery technology to enable that refinery to grow and serve the markets more broadly down the road. So lots of possibilities here, and it's time to take advantage of them, Minister, and great to hear that you're doing that now.
That's awesome, Don. Thank you very much. I'm going to pull in Chris Hodgson now. A lot of people don't know Chris from his time when he served as well constituents, but now is with the Ontario Mining Association. So Chris, why don't you give us your perspective from, I guess, from the representation you do for your clients?
Well, we think there's a great opportunity. Back in 2016, our members, we represent all the operating mines in Ontario, and Don and some others that are getting close to production, and some large suppliers. So we've adopted a target zero. We want zero harm in the workplace. We have one of the safest mining jurisdictions in the world that Minister Rickford mentioned. We also have, we want to make sure there's zero carbon pollution, and we're pretty close to that. We have a clean grid in Ontario. We have a lot of innovation taking place at our mine sites. We have all electric mines, and we're making a lot of progress around developing new technologies to be zero carbon. We also want to be zero waste, and we want to increase productivity. So it's target zero plus. The opportunity around critical minerals is one that's been evolving for the last number of years for a couple of reasons. One, the minister talked about the uses for critical minerals, the electrification of transportation, the renewable energy sector, and high-tech digital technology all require these minerals. They're largely supplied from China right now. And if we want to look at decarbonizing the supply chain, you want to make sure that these minerals are produced closer to home and you have production that's closer to home. So it's less carbon emissions on the transportation of the goods, just on a basic level. The minister, through his leadership, recognizes that this is going to be a growth area for Ontario if we're going to be competitive. And he's showing great leadership and bringing it to the attention of the world that we have those minerals here in Ontario and we produce them in an ethical manner, in a safe manner, but most importantly, in probably the most decarbonized manner in the world. So we can make the world greener and also help Canada's economy at the same time.
Absolutely. So Don, over to you now. tell us a little bit about what's happening in your part of the world specifically. And I think you're going to talk a little bit about ESG as well, because that is a new opportunity. Here we are entering in from traditional mining into critical minerals mining. What should we be looking for? What are you looking for?
Just want to say miigwech. Thank you for having me on the panel, and thank you for the question, Lisa. In a 2016 report by the National Indigenous Economic Development Board called Recommendations on Northern Infrastructure to Support Economic Development, we identified that for every dollar invested in infrastructure, that investment would generate $11 of economic benefits for fiscal benefits for governments. So, you know, when you think about that, for every dollar invested, $11 in return, and that would, because they result in jobs and strong, diverse economies. So I think this is an important point to make when we're talking about development in the far north regions of Canada, as we know that there is an infrastructure deficit in Indigenous communities, especially in the rural and remote areas of the country and in this province. So when we're looking at this, we know that infrastructure can actually have a huge change in benefit to communities in terms of transportation infrastructure. That would mean better access to communities for health, food security, equipment needs, building and building supply purposes. And improved connectivity is also important to telehealth, e-health, and school, business, all the services that our communities experience. And of course, energy infrastructure is really critical in the north. And all of these infrastructure needs are also beneficial to resource development. So I think that there's opportunities here to form partnerships. And going forward, when we look at these kinds of partnerships, we also need to look at the elements, as you mentioned, of ESG. When we look at environment and the social and governance elements of ESG, there's also a need to include Indigenous. And when I talk about ESG, I always say ESGI, because I think it's really important to have Indigenous inclusion in the work that needs to be done. There's a lot of great examples and case studies now of where you can incorporate sustainable resource development that benefits and works and supports Indigenous communities. So one of the things that we've been working on is the development of a Center of Excellence for Indigenous Mineral Development that's based in Northern Ontario that'll help build Indigenous capacity to make informed decisions on resource development, but it also helps the industry to work better with Indigenous communities. So this will help guide meaningful Indigenous involvement in the industry, help with the elements of ESGI, and also address the infrastructure deficits that we see and help to generate that extra return on those investments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As they always say, when you're dealing with remote mining, you always need two things. You need roads and you need power, and both of them can be extremely expensive. And looking for partnerships makes a lot of sense. Minister, while I have you, and I'm very lucky to be able to talk to you, by the way, I want to make one quick comment. It is not very often you come across an individual who has served both as the federal Minister of Natural Resources and is doing the same job on a provincial basis, a more narrow focus. So I think we're in really good hands in terms of you having the great grasp of the file, no question about it. But one part that Don just mentioned that I'm very interested in, can you tell us a little bit about the upside? What's the economic impacts of us seizing the opportunity with respect to critical minerals in the province?
Well, thank you for that, Lisa. I liken the comparison between flying in a jumbo jet to being a crop duster. And you're right to point out that provincial politics puts you much closer to the ground in terms of the impact that you can have for communities and for regions. And that's important to me. because in my previous life as a nurse, I had an extraordinary opportunity to live and work in isolated and remote Indigenous communities across Canada, but particularly in northern and northwestern Ontario. So the way we see this in terms of the economic impact is really sort of three, and I'll just go through them briefly. Pivoting from Don's extraordinary commentary, we forget sometimes that mining operations themselves are good economic activities, for sure, sustainable jobs, etc. But when we talk about Northern Ontario, Lisa, the legacy infrastructure projects are the real game changers. They're the short and medium term pieces that enable mining developments to move forward. Whether we're talking down in the Borden or Gogama region, where we have to fortify highway infrastructure and various water and sewer components, water treatment, or we move into the Ring of Fire, the Greenstone Belt, Don's interests out in far northwestern Ontario, up north of Wabsimung First Nation. The net benefit, obviously, is to build and make the north more accessible. Our government's invested in Watte Power, obviously move that file forward, a much needed electrification of many of the isolated and remote northwestern Ontario Indigenous communities. And we see a great opportunity, as you had said, Lisa, I keep wanting to call you minister, but because you used to make me, but no, I'm kidding. The opportunity to create alternatives for the Matawa communities and for Norrönt's considerations in the Ring of Fire, moving away from diesel to other pieces of energy, to Don's point. It goes without saying then the second point, the Indigenous and municipalities' involvement in this resource revenue sharing is creating new economic opportunities, and a particular emphasis on energy infrastructure. Don, I'm thinking of the East-West tie and mobilizing the fortunes of more than 300 Indigenous people fully qualified to work on that and other pieces of legacy infrastructure in northwestern Ontario. And then finally, Lisa, to the extent that a politician could ever be brief, and I'm doing my best here, is critical minerals more pointedly helps us in Northern Ontario, and I think the sector as a whole, to protect ourselves against the boom and bust cycles of commodities. Lisa, you and I went to the bottom of the earth in beautiful Red Lake that one time. We saw the opportunity, but as a guy who's been traveling in and out of there for a couple of decades of my life right now, if we had tumbleweeds, we would have seen them blow through Bombertown and Koshner a time or two. So critical minerals offers us a more sustainable gradient, if you will, in terms of economic cycles within this part of the commodity market that I think is very, very interesting for us, for the folks on Bay Street, and obviously it goes without saying for the northern communities. So this is a significant opportunity that I think the strategy intends to clarify and crystallize, if you will, and put us in a position to enter a global market with the kind of power, if you will, and profile that global markets will want to see in Ontario.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And yes, we did go and tour that mine together. But I was just still disappointed I didn't get a parting gift. I wasn't allowed to take anything out of the mine with me. In fact, they were very careful to make sure we didn't.
They X-rayed us.
Yeah, indeed. Chris Hodgson, if I could ask you about the bigger picture here. You've been involved in the mining industry for a long time. What's very unique, and we're being asked questions about this right now, what's very unique is the Biden administration has put out an executive order. They're taking a look at supply chains, and they are very interested in critical minerals as well in terms of defining them. Can you give us your interpretation as to what's going on? Is this something where you can see Canada and the United States cooperating, noting that the Deputy Secretary, Undersecretary wanted to talk to the Ontario government about these kinds of partnerships?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. And Minister Rickford, thank you. Last year's meeting with the Undersecretary, Minister Rickford invited me to be a part of. This came about, has a long history, actually. China effectively used their supply that they almost have a monopoly on of critical minerals to get better trade deals against Japan and others for the last 15 years. The United States under Trump had an executive order looking at the supply chain where the economy and national security have actually converged where you can't build an F-15 or any of the high tech that's required now in your defense systems without a supply of critical minerals. The second thing that happened is the world wants to go with less carbon. Global climate change has forced the re-examination of how we make things in the supply chain and the energy we use in supplying it, how these minerals are produced. So the opportunity is these minerals are required. They want to find shorter supply routes closer to home. Whether it's going to be Canada or some other jurisdiction depends on who is nimble enough to have the right regulatory and rule of law system set up to give certainty to investors to develop these minerals. It's we think it's the best place is here. All our operating mines and all our new mines will have Indigenous relation contracts. We have them with every operating mine. We employ more Indigenous people than any other sector in Canada, and we think we've had the cleanest production supply chain. So companies like Tesla, they're making EV, electric vehicles, they're interested in making sure that the supply chain is also carbon free. And so we need to market this, and Minister Rickford, through his leadership in developing strategies, is the right approach to tell the world that not only do we have these minerals, but we're going to do it in a way that's sustainable environmentally and decarbonize the world.
Yeah. So Don Bubar, you are now in the process of getting something up and going. So you're developing, which can be a very difficult world. So there's a lot of questions coming in from the folks who are listening in, asking about the process, the permitting process, the regulatory process. What would you advise the government? And I'm not seeking you to be critical of the minister as he's sitting here with us, but what would you advise the government in terms of helping to smooth the process so that Canada doesn't get left behind and Ontario doesn't get left behind as we all try to search for these critical minerals?
Well, I'd say, Minister, remind the Premier to get the scissors out and start cutting the red tape as soon as possible. Because basically it's just been, there's aspects of the regulations governing the mining industry that should be changed to accommodate how different it is to get some of these non-traditional commodity supply chains started. Lithium is a good example. And all the other ones that end in that no one's ever heard of since their high school chemistry class, it's the same challenge. You've got to be able to start taking some rock out of the ground as a bulk sample, processing it, and defining what your process is and your product is, so you can then attract customers and then get the operation started. When they're not exchange traded, you have no certainty on that until you've started some small scale production of the products. And that's what the mining regulations now do not encourage, and that needs to be changed as a first priority.
Yeah. So Don Madahbee Leach, you took part recently in the federal government's announcement of the listing of the critical minerals. And I'm wondering, you sit in a very unique position. You work both with the provincial government and with the federal government. Do you see that they work well together? Do we have a cohesive strategy here in Canada?
Well, I think that we basically operate under the same laws in terms of what we're trying to work towards in terms of Indigenous engagement that needs to be at the forefront of all developments. So when I was listening to my friend Donald speak just a second ago about cutting the red tape, well, a big part of ensuring that projects go forward is helping Indigenous communities to make informed decisions. That needs to be done at the beginning of the process. Otherwise, there's going to be issues. And I think that knowing that the focus is going to be on critical minerals, which are really important to sustaining life, all life, plant life, animal life, of human beings and the planet. I think if we focus on critical minerals and people understand what critical minerals is all about, that really helps, because I think we can get behind the resource development done in a sustainable way that's focused on only those minerals that we really, really need to survive. And I think that that's so critical, and that needs to take place at the beginning. You can't just change legislation and cut red tape without having some a process there that involves Indigenous people right at the beginning, and make sure that our people are educated to make the informed decisions. That's going to be really important going forward. And so I think all levels of government need to recognize that and realize that that this is part of what needs to happen in any resource development in Canada. And I think it can happen. There's more and more sophisticated leadership that understand the needs, but we need to make sure that everyone does and everyone's engaged.
Yeah. So, Minister Rickford, I've got a question here, and it's a very reflective question. They're saying, in what ways has COVID highlighted the need and importance of Canada's critical mineral supply? And do you think that this is going to continue? Are we so focused on supply chain and critical minerals because of what we've gone through in the past year? And is this a flash in the pan, or is this something that's going to continue? What's your thought?
Well, first of all, thank you, Lisa, for not letting me respond to Don's comments about red tape. I think there's a better discussion to go on about what progress we have made, and recognize that there's more work to be done. But no, this is not a flash in the pan. And as I alluded to, the critical mineral strategy is designed for a couple of important reasons that I spoke to in my more formal remarks. But in fact, it's been the mining sector as an economic activity in the province of Ontario that's likely been the most, or amongst the most, robust during the pandemic. Obviously, in purely health and scientific matters, we've been able to, after the first wave and a couple of little bumps, get those activities back up and running very quickly, because the market demand globally continued. I think that the pandemic also highlighted the need for different kinds of technology and innovation that critical minerals can serve. And as Don mentioned earlier on, some of the more obscure critical minerals come to light as we look at some of the critical elements, if you will, that are involved in health innovation in particular. So these will all be pieces that I think fit together nicely in a puzzle we'd like to solve. And that is, as I alluded to earlier, a boom and bust cycle. Moving outside, if you will, I don't want to say an over-reliance on gold. It's been very, very steady for us overall. But to focus on a stronger foundation for the mining sector. And then as has been alluded to by all my friends on the panel today, the opportunity to underpin this with critical minerals and a greater complexion, if you will, of mining and mineral activities in Ontario.
Yeah. So Chris, should governments, federal, provincial, municipal, whatever level, should they be investing in the roads and the power sources into mines? Is that a proper place for governments to be sitting as we pursue the critical minerals file?
That would be, obviously we accept the money, but I don't think that's the critical issue. I think that the issue is to have a regulatory system that's based on the rule of law, so that the A-team of investors around the world will assess the risk. If the business case is there, the infrastructure will follow. The opportunity, we're talking a lot about greenfield sites, but to have a strategy that integrates your critical minerals with your manufacturing and your overall general greening of the economy. Our existing mines in Sudbury in particular, if you're talking about electric vehicles and battery production, our refineries produce a lot of these critical minerals already. We just need to have a strategy, as Minister Rickford talked, to combine that with our general economy and to get the supply chain right. If you're talking about supply chain, I think it was a wake-up call. I don't think it changed the issue. It just accelerated the trend that was already happening. But our mines provided the safety equipment for the Toronto hospitals, the masks, the respirators in the early days, because the supply chain completely broke down globally. Because we had a mining industry that knew the health and safety and operated internationally, operated through Ebola, we were able to step in and help through Minister Rickford's ministry and Ministry of Health, the healthcare voluntarians. But that was just a wake-up call. The trend has been going on for a number of years, and like I mentioned, the supply chains are going to get closer to home, just in terms of reducing the carbon footprint.
Fair enough. Donald, I'm going to call you Donald just to make sure it's not Don. Donald, a question comes in from the audience. How can newer entrants in the critical mineral space compete commercially when you're seeing state-owned enterprises that are often involved in establishing this production in other parts of the world?
By innovation and creating new and better ways to make these products more efficiently, lower cost, and to meet more demanding specifications for how they're used. That's where you can get advantage. So one of the opportunities we haven't talked about for Ontario is to encourage more investment in research and development at the universities and elsewhere to start to work on new ideas on how we can take more advantage of our critical minerals resource wealth and innovate a whole lot of new ideas on products that'll give us advantage in the marketplace going forward.
Yeah. Don, I was going to go to you, Don. Take yourself off mute.
Okay. Yeah, just I wanted to say something about one of the initiatives that I know about in terms of, I think in the value chains and being innovative, as Don is suggesting. I know of a project in Quebec where Rio Tinto is actually using 85% of their waste and tailings for and extracting some of these critical minerals from that. And I think, why can't we do that? I think more investment would come our way if we're using the innovations that are there and building on them. And of course, reducing waste is really important to all peoples, especially our people. And I think that it's going to be important that we do focus on that innovation going forward.
Yeah. Minister?
Can I add to that, Lisa?
Absolutely, Donald.
Yeah, that's been a theme that I've been talking about for quite a while. Opportunities to recover critical minerals from historic mine waste. And it's a huge opportunity because there are so many examples of closed mine sites and abandoned mines that were developed for one traditional commodity decades ago, but there were a whole lot of other elements in the ore that just ended up in waste piles.
Yeah.
We have to open those up now and see them as opportunities to go in and apply new technologies, recover the critical minerals, and completely remediate the long-term environmental liabilities while we do it. Clean up the mess, make money while we do it.
I like it. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on Don's point about the Mining Act, and it's designed for bulk sampling being the final stage. Whereas Don's talking about is sort of research and development to find out what could this product be used for. That's different than traditional mining where there's a market already for gold, nickel, and copper. The ingredients and the chemistry is already known. This is a product that we're not sure what all the use could be, and you have to take it to a lab to find if there's an end user that could use it for manufacturing, and then try to have the manufacturer located in Ontario. So it's totally different. I'm not an expert. Mr. Rickford, through a strategy, will develop whether you need to change the act, regs, or policies, or maybe just need a workshop with ministry staff and some proponents like Don to see if you can work out the practicality around that to make it work.
Yeah. Minister, I'm just going to ask you, there's been a lot of talk about Elon Musk, about Teslas, about batteries, and certainly his publicity of it all has really brought new awareness to even my 16-year-old as to what's going on. But one thing I keep hearing is the question of whether or not we're going to be locating auto parts and auto parts plants and assembly plants near the source of the chemistry of the component parts of battery. Do you think that's a possibility? Is that where we're heading in Canada?
Yeah, I totally believe it, Lisa, and there's a couple of important reasons. If you'll indulge me for just a quick sec to Don and Donald's points, we wouldn't have dealt with this, Lisa, in our federal roles where we both served as Minister of Natural Resources. But these are incredible opportunities, and frankly, what they translate to for us right now in the province of Ontario is huge contingent liabilities. Literally, large amounts of money sitting on our books. So any opportunity we have to develop those in the context of critical minerals is a great opportunity as well. But, we've talked today about the significance of a supply chain, and Ontario as a government, obviously, has spent the last couple of years cleaning up and cleaning out, if you will, the electricity system. I don't want to imbue my inputs with political speak, but I think it's largely and widely accepted that Ontario was a very expensive place to do business when it came to the cost of energy, specifically the cost of electricity. And how that relates to your question is that by shifting the global adjustment, taking the cost of wind and power out to our industrial class users, Ontario is within 2 years now, effective January of this year, become one of the most cost competitive areas for electricity. The mining sector alone has benefited significantly by a cost savings of up to 16%, which is why Newmont Gold proceeded with their complete electrification of the Borden site. And now, more pointedly to your comments about battery capacity, as I said in my formal remarks, battery storage and electric vehicles, battery BEVs, these are clearly an area of strength for us in the context of the automotive sector. Technology has been spoken about. I've spoken about it today. But we have an incredible ecosystem. I guess that's one of the buzzwords we use here on everything now, from not just the human resource capacity, a supply chain that pairs up nicely with critical minerals to make a more robust supply chain, but obviously the cost of electricity. And now as we move into battery storage, a way not only to enhance the value proposition of critical minerals, but also as a way of mitigating a phenomenon in Ontario based on how our electricity is priced, that when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, we have an opportunity to keep surplus electricity, not spill it over to neighboring jurisdictions at ridiculously low costs. And now on a pure cost basis being, as I said, amongst the top 2 or 3 real cost competitive jurisdictions for the cost of energy, moving beyond provinces like Quebec and Manitoba, where their cost might seem low, but it's baked into other tax challenges for them as a province that has put Ontario historically and now back into a position to be an economic powerhouse in manufacturing, paired with what we're talking about here in mining and an exceptionally competitive electricity cost.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, questions come in, and I'm going to frame it up for you in order for it to be more applicable to the people that you represent. And I guess there's always been a criticism of mining that it's very male dominated. I've belonged to women in mining, and I've been around the system for a long period of time. Do you think that there's an opportunity as we move into critical minerals as non-traditional mining? Is there an opportunity here to push diversity and inclusion a little bit more as we move into this new world?
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for us. The fact that half of the workforce are female and we are underrepresented there. We have a shortage of skilled workers right now. So I would encourage, there's certain thresholds. Anybody that wants to go into mining that can meet the qualifications, we'll hire. And we're definitely raising the bar. First Nations have the right demographics, so we're probably overrepresented in First Nations compared to other sectors of the economy. We definitely want more women in mining. We've had that as a theme for a long time. We actually had manufacturers of overalls change their design so they'd be more female friendly. Australia was ahead of us on this, by the way, because unlike other sectors, we can fill our needed employees by just increasing the number of females in our workforce. Yeah. That's a huge accessible pool that is going to solve our labor problems in the future. So it's a great question.
Well, we appreciate the audience for writing it in. I'm going to ask Don, not Donald. What is your view? Do you think that we have an opportunity here as we move into critical mining, critical minerals, to push on the inclusivity, diversity, workforce balance?
Absolutely. It's a glorious opportunity because, as I said earlier, a lot of this is now about innovation and creating new technology. And I know there are lots of very intelligent women out there that would have great ideas on how to innovate new applications for critical minerals. And that's all part of this emerging new industry.
That's true. Dawn, you get the last word on this before I throw it back to Karen. So over to you. What do you think inclusivity?
Well, I think that I started to see some boards of directors include women and are looking towards the 50% inclusion of women on their boards, because that's where it really matters, is in the top positions, the senior positions, and on the boards. And I saw a stat somewhere recently that showed that only 0.8% of boards have diversity in terms of people of color on their boards. So I think that says a lot there where the decisions are being made. So I'm an advocate for including people on the boards, but especially women. And I really appreciate the concerted efforts by some companies now to do that, because we have a lot of qualified women. We have a lot of qualified Indigenous people who could be in these leadership positions. And we know that bringing women, diverse groups, diversity has actually increased the bottom line of a lot of these companies by having that lens and point of view included.
Yeah, and
Lisa, I just if I
could
chime in on that. This is such an important subject, and since we last worked together, obviously, my two little girls, Abigail May and Poppy Kate, have gotten a lot bigger. And this has been a central focus for the Premier and I. And I can assure you that at every turn, we have made sure, and we haven't had a problem, by the way, when it comes to meritocracy, identifying women in leadership. I work very closely with women in nuclear on the new SMR front. That's very, very exciting. There isn't a board that the Ontario government is either through its crown corporations and or as a major shareholder, that we have not only populated them with women, not only have they become leaders, and we've asserted that they could be and should be, but in many instances, they have been Indigenous women. And that's something that's very, very important to me. You should probably take note that we have two very talented women now heading up the IESO and ISO as it's known, and the OEB. And again, these are not picks just based on gender. These are picks that on any given Sunday, as the football saying goes, these people knock it out of the park in terms of being in the upper echelon. So it's not just about board representation. It's about leadership in the C-suite, moving and promoting women in, for example, the nuclear sector that are operators, highly technical and skilled people into those boardrooms. And leveraging their transferable skills of leadership and technical understanding, and that kind of commitment is proving to make our system much stronger and much better. So we're very proud of our accomplishments. No question, there's a ton of work left to do, but we're committed to it, Lisa.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to pass it all over to Karen at this point in time. Thank you all for a wonderful conversation and a great discussion on an incredibly important topic, critical minerals here in Ontario. And Minister, thank you very much for your time. We're grateful for you spending the entire hour with us, which I know is difficult to do these days when you're super busy with lots of other files on your desk. So thank you. It was great to see you again. Great to see you. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Lisa. Guests, panelists, thank you for spending your lunch hour with us today. It's clear that we have, as Dawn Madahbee Leach pointed out, the sophisticated leadership required to ensure that Ontario secures its place as a North American leader for responsibly sourced critical minerals and rare earths. We are, without a doubt, to be a little cheesy, at a critical time on critical minerals. And it's always encouraging to see public and private sectors come together with Indigenous communities and businesses to unlock new opportunities for Ontario and beyond. So Minister Rickford, Donald, Chris, and Dawn, we appreciate you taking the time to share your insights. Lisa, thank you for guiding today's important and timely discussion. And I also want to take note that you are in green today and wanted to take a moment to wish you and everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day. Guests, we hope that you'll join us for another upcoming event on Tuesday, March 23rd, when we host an all-star CEO panel that will discuss powering a strong economic recovery post-COVID. We'll be joined by Daryl White, Mark Little, and Monique Leroux as they examine what a healthy, resilient recovery looks like for Canada. Thank you to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. And thank you again to Castles and Avalon Advanced Materials for sponsoring today's event. Our events would not be possible without our sponsors, so thank you for your continued generosity. Guests, panelists, thank you for joining us. Please stay healthy and stay safe. Take care.